But like I stand by my decision in the off season to look at Atlanta at Indianapolis and go, Jesus Christ, no
Yes,
way do I
no,
want to go and see that game. So hello and welcome to All Four Quarters, your one-stop shop for news, views and overreactions to all things NFL. As we will be looking at the completely expected and not surprising in any way defeat of Buffalo and Pats. So hey, we got Connor here and we got Sean.
oh,
How are we getting on? How's tricks at yourself?
yeah, not too bad. The house is a bit of a building site at the moment. We're getting things done in the kitchen and the living room simultaneously. So, but it should be just this one week. Although you can trust builders that they'll definitely take as long as they said they will. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
I've
believe
been.
that bathroom you started 2 years ago is still ongoing, right?
No, that only took 6 days, and they said five, so it was fine.
Oh, I thought it took much
Uh,
longer than that. Fair enough.
no, there was a different bath. So we have the ensuite and we have the main bathroom.
Hmm.
The main bathroom was on time. The ensuite did take about 3 months,
Yeah,
and
that's the one I
it
was thinking of.
was not supposed to take
So I
that
remember you're like,
long.
oh yeah, they'll be in and out in like 7 days, and it's like,
Yeah, the guy was saying it would be ready for, like, I think the May bank holiday, and it by the time we got to the June bank holiday, it still wasn't done. So it was yeah, that was interesting. But these guys seem to have a little bit about them, but it is
yeah,
quite disruptive. So I've been going into the village to do my work, and that's been interesting enough. Getting used to just how awful the public transport is, because we only have one car. So even though I can drive, I still have to get the bus like a jabroni.
oh no,
And yeah, yeah, yeah.
heartbreaking stuff. John, you're walking distance to that village, aren't you?
Well, I could. It's one of these things. It's about 40 minutes, I would say, to get
Hmm.
into.
Actually, you see,
You just wouldn't want to do it multiple times a
yeah,
day.
see, as you say that, like every American listener is just like, what? They would walk 40 minutes? What? Uh, Very good. How did you find your solo run last week? Did you enjoy it?
That was interesting. Yeah, I thought it would only be like an hour or something, but it ended up being almost an hour and a half. So I definitely did things to say, and I guess I expressed opinions on things I usually wouldn't have, because there's certain things I kind of focus on when we do
Yeah, that whole
two
section
of
on
us or three
Israel
of
was
us.
intense. So-
I don't know. I got a good email from Aaron Rodgers saying I really nailed some of the Al conspiracies there, so we're in a good
Excellent.
place. But yeah, yeah. No, it was an interesting one. It's a whole other kind of experience. I would say, doing a solo
Hmm.
to doing a duo one. But I'm not opposed to doing it again if it crops up as a
Yeah, yeah.
possibility in future.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Very good. Well, yeah, nothing too wild or crazy on my side. I was off in the wilds of the west of Ireland. It was very nice, but the internet was incredibly bad. I'm still waiting on the second half of that Chiefs Bills game. I'm sure we did well, and but no, it was lovely. Now we kind of got it was quite wet, but we got a lot of hiking in and stuff, and it was nice and chilling out. But yeah, no. So we'll move on and have a look at some of the news. So. The big news, I suppose, is Brian Daboll has been fired. New York Giants have decided that now is the time to strike on getting rid of their head coach, presumably kind of get themselves a little bit ahead of the pack in terms of looking at new options and who might be out there. Um, They've kept the GM, which is a little bit messy, particularly given from all the insider sources we hear. Dayball wanted to move up and get Dart, and the GM didn't, and he looked to be doing pretty well. And now you're getting rid of the guy who wanted them and keeping the guy who didn't want him, and so on. I imagine it might be not long left on the clock for the GM as well. They probably want to clear house and do a pairing of a coach and a GM coming in. But focusing on Dayball, obviously he came down as the quarterback whisperer, having been seen as the guy who fixed Josh Allen. He ended up with a 20, 40, and 1 record, which is not good for those who can't do percentages. He had one playoff win. He won Coach of the Year in his first year, and then this is his third season in a row where they've started 2-8, which is
Wow.
very, very bad. Um, Obviously there's a couple of areas of problems. So he's been getting bad headlines recently. Obviously he got fined for going into the blue medical tent to try and speed them up on on the concussion protocol to get a player back in the game. Not a good look. He has obviously not been finding success with the team at the moment. It's just not been great, and you could kind of tell in his pressers during the week in advance of this is coming out that he kind of knew the writing was on the wall as well. There's some talk in the media about him maybe going up and helping out Buffalo again, as he obviously, was their offensive coordinator previously, but it doesn't sound like there's a huge amount of interest from the other side on that one either. And then, from the organization, they're also looking at him as being the guy who, said, there's nothing of worth with this Danny Dimes fella. We should kind of move on from him. And now they're seeing him find great success elsewhere. Basically, just it's not a great look. New York seems to have essentially been cursed when it comes to coaches since the firing of Tom Coughlin, and we'll see if they can find a better replacement now. It's an attractive enough landing spot, big market, big visibility, which can sometimes be a negative to some potential suitors, but. You've got what looks to be a promising young quarterback in Dart. You've got pieces around him. You've got a superstar wide receiver. You've got you've got Cam Scatterbo or whatever remains of Cam Scatterbo after 4 games of running into a wall at the start of next season. And yeah, like there's reasons to like it. There's decent pass rushers and so on, but there's a lot of work that needs doing.
Yeah, no, I mean certainly it's a good move by the Giants because I think whatever magic Dayball had, I think was kind of used up in that first year when he had Danny Dimes playing well, when they had the offense running, at a very nice speed and a very good defense, and they beat the Vikings in a playoff game, and they looked like they were turning things around. It really hasn't. Once that momentum of that initial burst kind of went away, there really wasn't all that much to like about him, and it doesn't seem like he's solving problems. Dayball or the problems that arose, and the team just kind of seemed to be getting progressively worse as time got on, despite the fact that they did, as you say, have a kind of influx of a lot of young new talent, especially in the last year or so. That really means that the Giants, as an organization, do have a possibility of attracting someone better. I'm Dart, Scatterbo, you got Malik Neighbors as well coming off injury next year. You got Brian Burns on the defensive side. There's definitely a young core you can build around. And the Giants are not the Jets. It's not an organization that is just prone to perpetual failure. This is a team that is, won Super Bowls. They've won 2 Super Bowls in the last 20 years. This is an organization that when they get their shit together can win big, and they now have the personnel to do it. But it's just clear that Dayball wasn't the guy for that. So yeah, I definitely think it's the business needs to be done. I mean, mid-season firings are always a bit strange because you're basically giving up on this season, and it's not entirely sure what they're going to do with the remaining 7 games or whatever they have to play in terms of that. But I mean, I think in the off season they are going to be top of a lot of prospective high-flying OCs or DCs looking for new jobs. The Giants' job is definitely going to be one that attracts a lot of good coaching talent, and so I would expect them to be quite good. Maybe not next year, but maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. I think there's a really good team that can be pulled out of this one.
Yeah. Other big news has just happened just after the last podcast. Dallas defensive end Marshawn Nealon died at the age of 24. It was a self-inflicted gunshot wound after he was having some mental health problems and was, I believe, chased by the police. But obviously, R.I.P. to him and his family. And there's been a lot of good stuff around the league about this in the wake of it, talking about mental health and so on. So just a very tough situation. We'll move on to controversy corner. We find some interesting news came out there about 2 days ago, Sean, that Micah Parsons, who we will be talking about later on in, I think, the dump off this week, as part of the trade to the Green Bay Packers, uh, turns out that old Jerry Jones slipped a poison pill into the contract, which is not something you see that often these days. But essentially, it's a clause that's put into the contract to stop the team being able to do something after the fact. So basically, Philadelphia had contacted Dallas about trading for Parsons the year previous. and they obviously don't want to trade him in division. So they've put a clause into the contract that he's not allowed to be traded on to a team in their division, the NFC East. And if he is in the first 2 years, I think, of the contract, an extra first rounder will have to be traded to the Dallas Cowboys. Nothing major to come of it. I can't imagine that's what was planned, particularly given the contract that they've given him. But it's just an interesting one to see that. So poison pills initially started out when you'd come out with a trade offer and the other team would be allowed to match it, and you could put a poison pill in that would be like, oh, you have to pay. I'll give you a $10 million bonus for every game you play in Ohio, say, and that means that the Bengals wouldn't be able to match the quote or whatever. It was very very odd, but yeah, just an odd old style one. Um, and the other bit of controversy here is the Commanders, who have been on the receiving end of some tweets from President Trump, mostly whenever he wants people to stop talking about Epstein or anything else that he's doing. He normally goes, "Oh, they should rename themselves the Washington Redskins, or else I'll fine them or I'll shut them down." He's now decided that what he wants their new stadium to be named after him. So what do you think, Sean? Would you call your stadium after Donald J. Trump?
It's total normal democratic president, not dictator behavior whatsoever to demand a football stadium be named after you. There's a lot of good stuff online about people, listing all the various stadiums that are named after like Kim Il Sung, or the guy from Kazakhstan or whatever. Like, they're
Hmm.
all of them dictators, and he really is true to form in this. I mean, it's the kind of thing. I think that the way that the tweet or the Truth Social or whatever it is that you call these things now, he kind of suggested he would try and hamper them actually building the stadium in Washington if they didn't do this. Which, this is the problem with Trump, right? It's not just the things he says; is that he does have the political power to do things out of spite, if people don't kind of conform to him. So I'm interested to see how much the Commanders will bend the knee in that kind of situation. Be very interesting. But
Yeah, it's
uh,
a little bit kind of, yeah, dictatory, but also that kind of like, I thought he's meant to be big free market capitalist, wants private enterprise shite. Like, it doesn't really seem to track with that usually for me. But yeah, just a little bit weird. So my advice to the Commanders would be, don't name your stadium after him, for the love of Christ, don't. Um, and crime and punishment, what are they doing? Probably felonies. No felonies this week, just smaller ones. Washington defensive tackle Deron Payne has been suspended for 1 game for punching Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is obviously in line with the 1 game that Drake Greenlaw got in the previous one. And Buffalo quarterback Josh Allen and wide receiver Elijah Moore have both been fined $14,000 for a throat slash celebration of a touchdown when they were playing against the Chiefs. Yeah, like I get, to a certain extent, this like not wanting to have violent acts or something, but the NFL are really, really starting to earn that no fun league moniker, right, Sean? With this kind of,
but yeah,
like, it was Rico Dowdle got done for having two pumps. Like, that's literally
yeah, I did see
literally a
that one. Yeah.
sketch from Key and Peele. And then this week in response, he scored a touchdown and did a no pump where he held the position and refused to thrust. It's just silliness, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think about all the various things that can get penalized in the NFL, and how strict they are, how good they are, for example, about the kind of concussion protocols or the dangerous tackles and stuff. And these are all things that are 15-yard penalties. And you see, like, at the bottom of the list of things that can get you a 15-yard penalty is celebrating too hard, or celebrating in a way that could
Too
be considered
sexily.
inappropriate.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, guys, let them have fun.
Mm.
It's obviously professional sports, high adrenaline situation. These are elite professionals who train their entire life to get here. You score a touchdown, particularly say in the Bills case, a big game against the Chiefs. Your big rival. You score, and you just want to let loose a little bit. I just say, just let them have
Oh yeah.
fun. It's not hurting anybody. Like,
Also, like
it's just such a bizarre thing to
the
me.
lines where they're drawn are so weird to me. So like, so at one point, was it last season or season before, and someone was flagged for this because they lifted up their top and they said, well, obviously he's doing that because that's how someone would show off if they've got a gun in their waistband. And I was like, what planet are you living on? But you are allowed to do because a quite common one is where you see them and they like draw a bowstring and release it when they get a
Hmm.
first down. So, like, at what generation of weaponry is it acceptable to be like muskets? Are muskets okay for, particularly for Patriots to do? I just don't understand. It's a mess. Like, just clean it up, NFL. We don't need any of this crap happening, and we don't certainly don't need 14K fines for touchdown celebrations. Let's go and have a look at the injury report. There's a couple of biggish ones here. So Packers center Elton Jenkins has fractured his leg slash broken a bone in his leg, so he's almost certainly gone for the season. Wide receiver for Arizona Zay Jones has torn his Achilles and is gone. And Las Vegas right guard Powers Johnson has an ankle injury and he's gone for the season. So three season enders there. A couple of other smaller ones. Buffalo tight end Dalton Kincaid is out for a couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. Garrett Wilson, the Jets wide receiver, has re-aggravated his knee injury. ESPN are reporting that it could be a couple of weeks, but there's not been a team announcement yet. I believe he's going for a second opinion. Marlon Humphreys, the cornerback for Baltimore, apparently he needs finger surgery, which would take him out for maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Although the discussion is he might just tape it up and play through it. The absolute monster. Cincinnati defensive end Trey Hendrickson is unlikely to play this week with a hip injury, and Washington quarterback Jaden Daniels will not be traveling to Madrid. Sad face. I'm going to be at the game in Madrid, so he's not going to be
God.
playing. So he's not going to be traveling. And Terry McLaurin is going to travel, but is unlikely to play. And on a slightly more positive side of injury news, Joe Burrow, they have opened his return window. He is back at practice. He has 20 days, I think, to join the active roster. Um, and he said in an interview he's excited that the division is still wide open and all that kind of stuff. And he's right. They're 2 games back. They play the Steelers this week, which will be a big, big, big game in deciding because Steelers are the ones who are 2 games ahead. So if they win this weekend, then I imagine we will be seeing Joe Burrow back on the field. But do any of these jump out to you at the moment?
Oh well, I mean, it's it. I mean, obviously for you for going to Madrid, not having someone like Jaden Daniels, I mean, it does kind of seem like that game is. It's so. It must be so annoying. You know, we could have got you could have gone to Berlin this week to watch a
Yeah,
an overtime classic featuring a breakout. You know, Jonathan
a
Taylor having a
game that
game for the
still had
ages.
tickets available the week of the game as well, I might add.
Oh,
Like,
and instead you have to watch the beat up Commanders play a Dolphins team that are probably not very good.
but
I mean,
they
it's
were equally damaged at the moment, which means we might get a good matchup. But like I stand by my decision in the off season to look at Atlanta at Indianapolis and go, Jesus Christ, no
yes,
way do I
no,
want to
no.
go and see that game.
That's absolutely fair. I mean, I said that on the pod last week. It was like it started in preseason when this was announced. It was like that's just not going to happen. Not a thing anyone wants to go to, even if it's in Berlin. And now, no, the week before, I was like, man, that would be a good game to
Mm,
attend. I mean, apart from that, I mean, so some of the bigger ones, obviously, I know O line people don't get a lot of emphasis, but the Packers losing their center Elton Jenkins, and he's a
huge.
two-time Pro Bowler, and he's, you know, the center quarterback thing is it's a very important combination in terms of timing and just being on the same page. So it'd be interesting to see how the Packers offense, obviously they had a pretty poor outing this week, how that's going to go going forward. And I suppose other ones to look out for. I would say the Dalton Kincaid being out for a few weeks.
Yeah.
He's kind of evolved into a very big part of that Buffalo offense as just the kind of the get out option for Allen, because there's just not an awful lot else going on with the receiving game in terms of consistency for him being out for a few weeks when the Bills are maybe not in the best place and have a couple of tough games coming up. I think that will hurt them. And obviously the big one, Joe Burrow possibly being back. I don't. I mean, I'm going to be honest here. I don't think it's going to make a difference because they are already getting lights out quarterback play and they're still not
Well,
winning
that's the
games.
thing. Like,
So I don't.
oh, they like, oh, they'll swap and they will still score 38 points and lose. Like, yeah, fair enough. And that's the thing. I think the Trey Hendrickson one is the concern here because they need to we'll talk about it in the game previews, but they need to win this week if they want to stay in this, and it would essentially be a doubler because you get to take it off the guys who are leading your division, but like, yeah, him not being in there because he's their big guy, and they paid him all that money. They didn't trade him at the deadline. Just one last bit of news, I suppose. For those who have been watching the sport for a bit longer, will remember Paul Tagliabue, the NFL commissioner from 1989 to 2006. He died at the age of 84 there. Overall, considered a good commissioner from the business side of things. They got multiple new stadiums. They got TV deals sorted underneath him. There weren't player strikes. He saw them through a number of big events during NFL. Like he would have been the guy who signed off on having the game post 9/11 and so on, and also all the NFL stuff around Katrina as well, and the stadium down there. He established a harsher stance on substance abuse and also created the Rooney Rule, which is the kind of the mandatory interviewing of minority background coaching candidates. Probably one of the prime examples of a great idea, incredibly poorly executed because we've seen multiple news stories about people just being invited to interview where there's no intention of hiring them just to fulfill a quota. It hasn't worked out, but it was well intentioned. His big criticism is probably the problem of concussions in the league that were happening there. He was the guy who tried to sell it as a journalist issue, people trying to make a story where there is no story, and I very clearly know that there was a story, and also that almost certainly the NFL were very well aware that there was a story there. But yeah, so kind of a mixed bag. I think overall, from the business aspects, considered good. Saw a couple of very large events, but also has some skeletons in the closet there, Sean.
Yeah, I would say he's the way. I think there's a way that someone was very much of his time, in
Hmm.
that he was the kind of you think about late '80s, the '90s, early 2000s. That's kind of the end of history. America as the hyperpower. It was a very particular cultural moment, and he was a big part of that, moving the NFL towards the kind of the even bigger business that it is now. I mean, we think about the NFL as being this huge thing. It's always been a big part of American cultural life, but as a business enterprise, certainly he was kind of a big guy in moving forward in terms of the bigger TV
Hmm.
deals and the multiple new stadiums. And I do think the fact that he handled a lot of labor problems, he found ways to work with the NFLPA and stuff, and they got a lot of labor deals done, which has been attributed to the fact that there hasn't been a player strike or a stoppage of play in a very long time, which is something that doesn't happen in American sports. It's something that's quite a common feature in a lot of other American sports, that
Yeah.
they'll lose portions of seasons. That didn't happen under his watch. But in terms of the stuff like the substance abuse, or the Rooney Rule, trying to create a rule to solve a problem but not actually dealing with the substantial issues, or the concussion stuff, that kind of does demonstrate that he just was very much a man of his time. The concussions thing, I'll give him a little. I mean, I will say the science on concussions wasn't quite as black and white in terms of the obviousness as it is now. Some maybe he can say that he wasn't fully aware of the situation, but I would say he probably didn't take it as seriously as he could have.
Hmm.
But again, that was just everybody in the '90s and early 2000s didn't really think concussions were a big a deal as
Yes.
they
Well,
are now.
like bear in
So
mind that this is the commissioner who saw off the XFL, who were essentially a pro concussion league. Like that's the time period
yeah.
we're talking about here. Like, yeah. And on that lovely note, let's move over and look at the games from last week. Okay, so Sean, we're going to start off with the one I talked about at the intro, Buffalo at Miami, 13-30, just the way you called it, right? Like you saw this happening. Everyone saw this happening. This was
I
expected and inevitable.
yeah, I think absolutely every NFL analysts, from the guys who work in LA to kind of amateurs like ourselves, we're all saying guaranteed that the Dolphins are going to hold the Bills scoreless in the first half of this, and just kind of cruise to victory. I mean, this was just. I mean, this is the thing about being a Bills fan, or what I imagine Bill fans are feeling from watching this. This wasn't like a game where you were, being beaten by a good team, or you just made one crucial mistake. There was kind of a fourth quarter shootout where you just didn't do enough at the very end. The Bills were like comprehensively outplayed in this game by a team that is not very good, by a team that we were making fun of earlier this season for just how utterly terrible they were, and we were counting the days until the head coach got fired, and the Bills were just not at the races at all here. And given that they were just 1 week off of the win over KC, where they established themselves once again as the AFC big dogs. They set themselves up with the Colts losing to be the number one seed. The playoffs will go through Orchard Park, and maybe just maybe this might be the championship year. And then they go and drop a stinker like this, and you can't even do things like blame the weather. Like sometimes when the Bills lose to the Dolphins in like September, it's because it's September in Miami and they've been sitting in the sun. It's November. It was cloudy. It wasn't that warm. It was not necessary. I mean, it was Miami, not that warm. I suppose it was probably still warm by Buffalo standards, but this was not a performance at all that the Bills are going to take as something to be particularly happy about at all. And given how poorly the Dolphins started this game, it's absolutely amazing that the Bills didn't just kill them from the very start. Like the Dolphins had a penalty before the clock had even started. They had a penalty against them. They had to call a timeout before the first snap. Tua threw an interception on the very first drive, and you thought at that point, okay, the Dolphins are clearly just back in kind of standard 2025 form, and the Bills are going to romp here. And then they just never got going. They allowed Tua to overcome that early shakiness. He eventually put in quite a decent shift for him, 15 and 21 for 173 and 2 touchdowns. He had 2 interceptions at the end. There was also an awful lot of help coming from the ground game in particular. Davon A. had a monstrous game, 174 on the ground and 2 touchdowns. He had another 51 receiving as well. The defense kind of stepped up in a big way. Minka Fitzpatrick, he did a lot of things that didn't appear on the stat sheet, although he did top the tackles. He was the top tackler, but he didn't do an awful lot that could look up on the stat sheet, but he was like in every big defensive play. It was Fitzpatrick who was there, and I do think they're just caught. This was felt strange it is to say. This felt like a coaching victory for the Dolphins. The Dolphins came in with a clear game plan of how to beat the Bills, and they executed. They limited what Allen could do. They limited what the passing game could do. They clamped down in particular on the run game. James Cook only had 53 yards rushing here as the best rusher, and the Bills just did not have that counter punch. And we've talked about this before. The worry about the Bills is when they come up with a team that has a plan against them, it just doesn't feel like Sean McDermott and his men know how to solve the problems that are being thrown at them. And they often very much default into, let's just let Josh Allen win this game for us. And there definitely were times in this game where Josh Allen was trying to do Josh Allen stuff, as we call it. And he ended up, he was fairly decent numbers here, 28 of 40 for 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had an interception. He also had a fumble. He had 31 yards rushing. He made a couple of crucial mistakes, but the biggest problem is he just wasn't getting any help elsewhere. As we said, the run game is non-existent. On the receiving game, Shakir was their best receiver. He only had 58. He was sacked 3 times. The defense really kind of won that battle of the line. And I've seen reports and I've seen analysis of people talking about the Bills being unprepared, being outmatched, kind of walking in here after the KC game, expecting to win because they're the Buffalo Bills and they're the better side, and they've won 6 straight against the Dolphins, and just not being prepared for what was being thrown at them. So they've thrown away their advantage in the AFC. They've thrown away all the momentum that they brought into it. They're now 2 games behind the Patriots in their division. So at the moment, they're staring at a wild card kind of road game as a possibility for their path to the championship, which is not what anybody in Buffalo wanted. But they're just liable to have these kinds of games. We've seen this throughout the entire Josh Allen era. The Bills are just liable to every once in a while just have an absolute stinker like this, and you just have to wonder why they can't find the consistency to be a team that doesn't do that. And I do have to think maybe it is a coaching thing, that as long as McDermott and his team are there, there's just times they just don't show up and they don't do the preparation and they get caught out and they just don't have the answers for the questions that are being posed to them.
Yeah, well, look, Super Bowl hangover, right? Uh, Beating the Chiefs in the regular season is the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl, and they just can't drink like they used to. Yeah, look, they feel they felt underprepared. Yes, Miami seemed to be playing quite well. Like Tua's completion percentage was quite high. They got the run game going, and that's the thing that, like, the Chiefs didn't use the run game particularly at all against Buffalo when they were there, and some of that's to do with injuries and whatnot. But, like, this has been a criticism of Buffalo. They're missing a couple of guys to injury, but even at full strength, their defense isn't great. If you can run on them, then they don't really have a huge amount of answers to that, and, like, it's eternally going to put put a cap on it because like if this is what this Miami offensive line and Achan can do, like imagine what that Saquon Barkley behind an Eagles line would be able to do to a team like this. So
Or Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. Like,
yes, but they'd face them before the Super Bowl though, right? So I was just thinking more of a
true,
Super
true.
Bowl matchup, but yeah, essentially, they can take away, they can walk away from this and figure it out and kind of go, right, this is what we need to work on. They can't add players at this stage, so they just need to get out the schematics and start working on. The thing that concerned me most is just the offense looked turgid, like it just wasn't going anywhere. And we've been harping on this for ages that at the trade deadline they should have been adding a wide receiver. It was interesting actually. It was Miami that apparently they were linked to. They had been in talks about trying to get Jalen Waddle off them, but the ask was too much. But yeah, just it's in. I am intrigued by this Miami team because they did actually like it wasn't just that Buffalo looked not at the races. Like Miami actually something was clicking for them. It was working. It was interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing them in person now just to see what see what you can kind of see on the field instead of just on the TV screen. But yeah, like moral victory for them. They get the the win over the divisional big boys, albeit they're not the big boys currently, as you said. They're behind New England and increasingly behind New England at the moment. But yeah, we'll see. Because like if you could throw together a couple of performances like this, it might actually get the higher ups considering whether or not to get rid of McDaniels. Because like just a couple of marquee pelts on the wall wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them. But yeah, just hilarious. Just straight up hilarious. I gotta say. Atlanta and Indianapolis up next, 25 to 9. Like just the play when he was running around and he ran around for like 26 seconds and then threw the ball to the first down marker. Good to get the ball to the first down marker. What the fuck was going on there? Like, what was the play design? That was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And I did love the tush push resulting in a fumble. I genuinely lol at that one, but yeah, it's look whatever. Atlanta at Indianapolis up next, 25 to 31. The game that I should have gone to instead. A fantastic game for the international series. A second game in a row that's gone to overtime there. The difference being in this one, you actually wanted to watch overtime, which is nice. Overtime for Taylor. Sorry, I mean the Colts to win. Jonathan Taylor was all they needed today. 284 all-purpose yards, 3 touchdowns. Atlanta made a coward's move at halftime where they turned the ball over. They had 9 or 10 seconds left on the clock, and instead of, you know, throwing a Hail Mary or trying to do a 7 yard out and kick a long field goal, they just took a knee, and that, will haunt them because it was tied at the end, and that's what allowed them to go to overtime, which is, Atlanta just shooting themselves in the foot whenever they get themselves into a decent position. Uh, like they had a good game though. Return to London, he was over 100 yards in this one. Jones was sloppy, more sloppy than we've seen him recently, which is not great. I know it wasn't great weather over there, but he had an interception, which will happen. He had 3 fumbles in this game. They didn't lose them all, but he had 3 fumbles. That's just not good. They scored in the first quarter. They went to sleep for the second and third quarters, and they woke up again in the fourth quarter and got it moving around. Tyler Warren is just really, really fucking good. Be it in the run game, blocking in front of people, or like he caught 8 of 10 passes thrown his way for 99 yards in this. It was great. The German fans were super duper excited. There was 10 sacks in this game. There was a missed field goal. There was made field goals. It was absolutely crazy. And like you look at this, and it went to overtime, and they had to get the score, and it felt right that Taylor got the score at the end for it. And RIP to whoever was playing you in fantasy last week, Sean. You've been riding that Jonathan Taylor train all year. But like,
46 fantasy points,
but like
baby.
you look at the statistics from this game, and you just go, how are Atlanta in this game at this point? Colts had 230 yards more than them. They had nearly a 2-to-1 time of possession advantage in this, but they just weren't closing drives, or they were kind of making silly mistakes here and there. Like, this is a game that on paper, the Indianapolis Colts should have won this by 30 points, but instead they didn't. The Falcons on the other side, like, the Falcons were a mess too. I couldn't get over this. I went back as I saw this stat, and I thought, no, that can't be right. And then I went back and I watched back through the tape on it. Like, the Falcons didn't convert a single third down in this game. Not one. Like, how did they end up tied? How did they get there? It's just absolute insanity. It was just fumbles and sloppiness from Indianapolis that allowed this to happen. But look, the right team won in the end, a good performance. But my God, is the expectations at the top end of the spectrum for Indianapolis slipping a little bit quickly here? Like this game, the game against Pittsburgh, and so on. It's just the, some of the gleam is coming off it a little bit. You're saying that in a game where, like I said, they had 250 yards on the ground from one player, and we're still going, yeah, but are they quite there, And we'll allow a little bit for the whole Germany of it, the travel, the messiness that can cause for them. But look, they deserved the win. They got the win. They shouldn't have gotten it this way. They'll walk away from this happy to have won, but really disappointed in how they played. Atlanta will walk away from this going, how did we let that slip through our fingers? Whereas actually, it shouldn't have been in their fingers in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it is as you say, an odd one that the Falcons were so competitive, given that the stats are just not in their favor. I mean, Michael Penix as well was 12 of 28 for 177. I mean, this is not a team that was particularly performing quite well, and we've talked an awful lot about the Falcons and their up and down season, and it's weird that they lost to a very good team in overtime, but it still felt like it was the bad Falcons out there. And if the good Falcons had turned up, they probably would have won this game, but they just didn't. I mean, the Colts. I mean, I would agree with you a little bit. I do think it is if you are a Colts, if you're in the Colts head office, or a Colts fan, it may be time to get a little bit worried. This is becoming a one man team, and not necessarily in a good way. The reliance on Jonathan Taylor is immense at this point, to the point where he'll have a game like this. Okay, that's great, but it will also, if a team, targets him and finds a way to stifle the run game, as the Steelers did last week. There isn't an awful lot else going on offensively for the Colts, which is worrying when you consider how vaunted the Daniel Jones's quarterback play and the passing game in general was only a few weeks ago. That just seems to have entirely evaporated, and that's almost forgotten or lost in this kind of situation. When Taylor does all the work to win the game, you forget the fact that Daniel Jones had a pretty poor game here, where it kind of felt like he was once again just getting a little bit panicky in certain situations, or making those kinds of mistakes that we know that he's capable of, and we know that hampered his ability to be all he could be when he played for the Giants. And the Colts have to be worried about that, because so much of their success to date this season has been about that dual threat, that the run game opens up so many options for the passing game, and then the passing game kind of with the various passing options that they have, and they have an awful lot of kind of deep players that can kind of, once the field is open up, you can get the ball down quite far down the field. That balance was what drove them, that you couldn't really find one answer for how to stop the Colts. And it kind of feels that they're increasingly become a team where, if you can figure out how to stop Taylor, and obviously that's a question of execution as much as it is game plan. I mean, teams can have what the Steelers' game plan was, but you also have to execute it at the level the Steelers were able to turn Taylor's ability to get 12, 15 yards of play and make him have to fight for 4 or 5 yards, something that really flips what the Colts are capable of doing. And if you can combine that with pressure against Jones, then suddenly this Colts team isn't quite as scary as we thought. So it does feel like a little bit of a fragile thing for the Colts in the last few weeks, and it's going to be interesting to see how that progresses. Do they find new answers to the questions that are being posed on them? Because right now they're in a really, really interesting place where they have a chance, if they hold things together. They're 8-2 now. They hold things together, they can get a number one seed here, right? And in the AFC, to get the number one seed is a really big deal. You get that home field advantage, and you stay away from having to play in Arrowhead or having to go up to Buffalo. These are really massive things for chances in the playoff. But it kind of feels like that could fall apart very easily. And for the Falcons, I don't know, man. It's just such ridiculous inconsistency, this mismatch between the amount of talent they can put on the field, especially offensively, and what that offense actually looks like. It's almost embarrassing that they aren't able to find, an 80 to 90% performance every
Yeah.
week. Instead, we're getting sometimes 120%, and sometimes they give us like 45% of what the Falcons should be. And it's just not good enough. It really isn't good enough. And I think it is a coaching thing, that they need to figure out how to
Oh,
get
yeah.
things going on that side of it. Yeah.
Big time. Next up, New England at Tampa Bay, 28 to 23. The Pats steaming ahead, Sean, in what I wasn't. I wasn't completely convinced by this, but they were beating them quite well.
Well, it's interesting because I thought it was one of the most impressive performances of the season, but largely because of who they were playing. The problem with the Pats this season is it's very hard to know how good they actually are because they've been beating up an awful lot of bad teams. And they looked quite out of sorts earlier when they were playing teams like the Steelers and stuff, and even the Raiders earlier in the season. They were learning a lot of things and they're trying to figure things out, and you kind of felt they were very much a work in progress. And the 7 game run that they've gone on has been beating up an awful lot of bad teams. And this, I felt, was a very important game for kind of getting a sense of the Pats. Are they for real? Can they play against an actual good team? And can they be competitive? And I did not think that they would be competitive. And I think a lot of people expected that the question was whether or not the Pats would have a close loss or whether or not they would get blown out. And instead, they were comfortable. Like there were moments in this
One
game
of
when
us
they were
picked them
like,
to win last week.
yeah, there were moments in this game where they were like, 2 touchdowns up and everything was cruising, and it really felt that like they were untouchable. I mean, I think it was definitely the most impressive performance of the season, and definitely a big scalp for where the Pats want to be, that they can able to take down a team of the quality of the Bills. And it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. Drake Maye was. I mean, the stats are they're okay. 16 of 31 for 270, 2 touchdowns, interception. He had a decent game, but it was quite streaky. I do think he's still, people are talking him up as an MVP candidate. I still think he doesn't quite have that consistency yet. I think he's showing
Are people
flashes of what he
talking about
can
Drake
be.
May as an MVP candidate?
Yes, they are.
Wow.
And he's liable to put the problem. I think is when you watch the Pats on red zone, you see the drives where May turns into peak Tom Brady with the efficient, just getting the ball down the field constantly, unstoppable. But you don't see the drives where they stall out all the time and constantly go 3 and out or whatever. Like it feels like there's half a really good quarterback in there with May, and it's not quite there yet. What was the big one? The big stars of this game though were Travion Henderson finally, being used. 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. A couple of really big breakout plays here for Henderson, and I think this might now establish him as the RB1, and that it can only be for the good of the Pats' run game. Mac Hollins, of all people, had a big game here. He had 106 yards. Kyle Williams, the rookie, had a big touchdown for 55 yards too. So there were lots of players kind of popping up and having their moment. I thought the O line, which has been the real weakness of the Pats this season, giving up sacks all over the place, only gave up 1 sack here. I think they put in their best performance for a long time. They were a very big part of some of Henderson's runs. They were opening up a lot of space, and they really won that battle of the line. And on the defensive side, I think we really got to see what Christian Gonzalez can be.
Yeah.
He was everywhere. He was shutting down. Anytime he was on even a major wide receiver, there just wasn't an awful lot going on. I think he was beaten once in a kind of a big scenario, but otherwise he was kind of the guy. So I was really impressed by the Pats. It does feel like it's come together. It's all very fragile, and I do kind of feel that even if they end up, I mean, I did see one blog talking about them winning 14 games this year, and I'm like, oh my god. I mean, yes, on paper they might be able to because their schedule is so weak, but that does not mean that they are a quality of a 14-win team, and I do feel they'll probably lose to the first good team they face in the playoffs. But that's a hell of a lot better than when they were this time last year. On the Tampa Bay side, the offense was quite good, despite the fact that they're quite light at the wide receiver. There's an awful lot of reliance on Igbuka. He had 115 yards touchdown. Overall, Baker, he put up those numbers, 28 of 43 for 273 and 3 touchdowns. I felt the bigger problem that the Tampa Bay faced here was their defense. That every time Baker and the offense pulled the Bucks within contention of the Pats, like it was almost automatically the Bucks defense would give up a big play to the Pats on the next drive to allow them to get that breathing space once again. There were constant situations where the game was getting tight and you felt like a team like the Pats might crumble because of their inexperience, and then the Bucks would just give up a big play and then suddenly all the pressure would be gone. So with the Bucks, I'm actually not really sure how good the Bucks are. They're a winning team and they'll probably win their division because their division is garbage. But I kind of feel like maybe they're going to be beaten by the first good team they face in the playoffs. But then we get into the question of how many good teams there actually are in the NFC this year, which I do
Hmm.
think is an interesting question. But I did expect the Bucks to play a lot better than they did here, and I don't know if their poor performance reflects well on the Pats playing well, or just that they didn't necessarily show up as much as they can. But you take the win and you take this run, and the Pats are odds-on favorite for a playoff spot at this point, and the Vrabel era certainly seems to be going somewhere interesting. I would just be very wary about the hype at this point. This is not the return of the dynasty or anything close to it. This is a young team with a lot of talent on it that is putting together the pieces, but is nowhere near ready to be considered kind of championship caliber or anything like that. So enjoy the run, Pats fans, while it happens, but do not expect another banner to be raised in Foxborough come the end of the season, because they're not anywhere close to there yet. Even if their record might suggest that they might be that kind of team.
Look, I think on their given day they definitely could. Like we've already seen them beat the Bills, so like we know that's very much possible. They've got good defensive pieces. They've got a good quarterback. Trevion Henderson looks great. Like if you can get 100 yards out of Matt Collins, like yeah, fantastic. No questions about the production there. And like I said, you've got your defensive pieces. You've got Gonzalez played very well in this one as well, and just lots of nice bits. Like you'd need it all to be landing. Like you need to be playing your perfect games. But like I think your concern is probably more to do with experience and being able to have everyone firing on all cylinders at that point rather than anything else. Because I think they're a good team. This one to me was more of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers question that you were asking there, because like I said, like Baker looked a little bit off. Like he still threw three touchdowns and no interceptions, but like he was about 60% completion, something like that. It wasn't great. They still lack anything in the run game. Like they had a couple of decent long runs here and there, but like they don't have any consistency in it. Abuka getting back helped the offense certainly, but like you can tell he's not fully back. Like he had 115 yards on six catches. He was thrown it 13 times. He caught less than half of the balls thrown his way, and some of that is just good defense, but some of that is just timing and Baker not being quite there on the same page as him with it. And it's him and Cade Otton are your top two targets, which is fine, I suppose. You got to be, if you're Tampa Bay, looking at like, are we going to get any other wide receiver help kind of coming back? I'm not sure what the status of Godwin is at this point. Is he going to be back this season at all or not? I know Evans won't be unless they make the playoffs, and even then it's questionable. But it just feels a little bit like you said. Then on the defensive side, they've got a few bits that work well for them, but it just wasn't working today at all. Just I think New England completely out schemed them in this one. And even at that, like I said, like I said, there's a lot of little lesser seen elements where it's all those four plays, five plays, and a punt kind of setups that are happening, because like it didn't open well. It opened with two punts, a touchdown followed by another punt. Like yeah, got into the second half, scored a touchdown. It goes punt after three plays, turnover and downs after seven plays, punt after three plays, interception after seven plays. Like it's not running away with it, but it also never really felt like the Buccaneers were massively at the races in this one. So good win for New England. They're on a good trajectory. But yeah, just the Tampa Bay. Yeah, I think the concerns that we had in the preseason about this is the problem with just running it back with a ever older roster. Like you need Abuka and people like that to come in and instantly contribute, because older players are going to drop off and the attrition is starting to hit Tampa Bay pretty hard. Our next game is Jacksonville at Houston, 29-36. Oh, Jags. Oh, Jags. Get out of your own fucking way for a change. Houston scored 26 points in the fourth quarter to come back and win from 19 points down. Like, there's collapses and there are collapses, and Jacksonville are phenomenal at them. And this is not a scary Houston offense. Not only is this not a scary Houston offense, this is a non-scary Houston offense that doesn't even have their starting quarterback in place. Lawrence looked middling in this game, about a 50% completion rate, 158 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. He also fumbled the ball twice. The running game for Jacksonville was sub 4 yards a carry. Like it was more just Houston shooting themselves in the foot and making mistakes that actually allowed Jacksonville to develop such a lead. Because like yeah, you look at the play, you look at the stats, you're like, yeah, this is not a good performance. Yet you are absolutely rollicking over the top of them. like Mills was fine in the fourth quarter. He was really good in the fourth quarter. He was a bit shit before that, if we're honest. And for some reason, with the backup quarterback in place, and this is a game that didn't get like too far out of the hand until into the third quarter, so you can't say game script because they're playing from behind. You have a backup quarterback in there, Davis Mills, who is not the strongest option that you could have, and your play calling is 45 passes to 22 runs, and your running game is averaging nearly 6 yards a carry, and you're doing more than 2-to-1 pass plays to run plays. Like that baffles me. How you can think that that's the way to effectiveness. And look, I know they won the game fucking by accident essentially because they allowed themselves to be nearly 20 points in the hole in the fourth quarter. But yeah, just rough going. Nico Collins looked good in this game. Kind of back to full strength, 7 catches for 136 yards. But again, the chemistry wasn't there with Mills. They just weren't on the same page. He caught less than 50% of the passes thrown at him. The defensive side kind of bailed them out as well. Houston, it looked like Jacksonville could have just gone down and scored again before the half, but there was an incredible one-handed interception by Stingley in this one that was, I was just one of the best catches I've seen, like receiver or defensive back of the year. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch the highlights of it. Absolute cracker. But then you look at it and you go again. And I know I've said something similar for a previous game for Atlanta, but like Houston, you're sitting in, you're not in field goal range, but you've got a little bit of time left here. Would you not just go up and attempt a long field goal? Like, just give it a crack. What's the worst that can happen? Both sides of this team coached this game horrendously and made ongoing terrible, terrible choices. Houston are coming out of this, and if you listen to all the Houston fans online and just their beat reporters and so on, they're kind of going, "Oh, is this us turning a corner? Like our defense is really good, but now is our offense really good?" It's like, no, it's not. Jacksonville shit the bed. Jacksonville are not a team to be taken seriously anymore. Jacksonville have had a couple of good games this year, but are just showing that they absolutely lack consistency, absolutely lack coaching direction on what they're trying to do. I don't see it happening for them. This was infuriating. I would imagine being a fan of either of these teams is heartbreaking. At least one of them got a win, Sean.
Yeah, I mean it's not a game where you actually come out of it all that happy about either team because Houston should never, you should never be in this big a hole against the Jags in the first place, and their offense just obviously without Stroud, there's not an awful lot going on, and they kind of got lucky in terms of momentum. But I mean, the Jags' failure here is it's really really damning that the Jacksonville can just collapse this badly. That once the comeback started and once the Texans kind of found a little bit of go in their offensive game, there just was no response from the Jags offense. They got 11 yards total in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's when a team is coming against you and they're finding their groove. You gotta. I mean, if you're Trevor Lawrence, or on the coaching side, if you're Liam Cohen, you got to be like, okay, let's just kind of control the tempo of the game. Maybe run it down their throat, or get a couple of nice slant passes, just something to control the narrative, control the momentum. A drive. All you really need is not. You need a 6 or 7 play drive where you kick a field goal and you kind of stop the thing that's happening. And they just didn't. They just kind of allowed it to happen to them. And it was happening on both sides of the ball. The offense just kind of just stopped playing and didn't have anything to respond to when the comeback started to come. And they were, there are multiple penalties all around. They just constantly were self-inflicting their errors. And on the defensive side, they allowed Davis Mills to look like a superstar. There was very little pressure. There was, the pass rush kind of evaporated, and suddenly this. I mean, the defense is supposed to be the better side of this Jags team when they're on their peak, but it just wasn't happening at all. And it's very hard to be a Jags fan, I think, and to watch this and think there's just no fight in this team at all. Like, this is a team that they weren't being, it was not like it was the Bills or the Chiefs or the Eagles or the Rams or something that was launching the comeback and seemed like an unstoppable force. This was the Texans led by Davis Mills.
Yeah.
Like this was not a scary beast. This was a divisional opponent that you have an awful lot of knowledge of, and you were in a position to get a big win that would put you in a very strong position for kind of playoff stuff, and you just got collapsed completely. So I could understand why Liam Cohen was so utterly outraged, and I do kind of think that there might be a point. It'll probably happen at the end of the season where he might start talking about it's me or Trevor Lawrence, because it's clear those guys do not get along.
Yep.
And it's clear that Cohen blames Lawrence for not being able to execute at crunch moments, and that's a relationship that I think is only going to go one way if the Jags don't start winning games quite quickly. From the Texans' point of view, I mean, it's really hard to take anything from this game. Their defense, which is supposed to be the best in the league, still gave up 29 points to the Jags. Not a good look. And their offense, okay, it looked great in the fourth quarter when they're doing their thing, but Davis Mills is not an NFL caliber quarterback on most days. He's not good enough to be leading a team that has playoff aspirations. And even when Stroud was in there earlier in the season, it didn't look great. This is just a very mediocre team, I think the Texans are, and there's not an awful lot of reasons to get excited about them. So, yeah, if I'm looking at if I'm a fan base of either of these teams, I'm like, oh, this is just awful. Why am I supporting these teams? They're just mired in their own mediocrity and incompetence. And I just don't know. The Texans, maybe you can feel a little bit happier about it because you do have a good defense most days, and when Stroud comes back, that offense has potential to click. But with the Jags, I just think there's very little to be optimistic about, because this is the best this Jags team is going to look, and they just don't look very good at all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as we say, all games are important, just some are slightly less important. So we go to those in the dump off. Starting up first, Baltimore at Minnesota, 27-19. The Ravens are back, revenge tour. Don't you dare count us out, and so on. I would say maybe Minnesota are just bad. This was a close game into the fourth quarter. Minnesota led at the half. Then they opened the third quarter with an interception and a fumble on their first two drives and never got back into it. It was a bad game plan. All of their running backs were over 5 yards per carry, and they did 42 pass plays and only 18 rushing plays. Like, it was ridiculous. Again, this was not an out-of-hand game, so I don't know why that was the game script they were running with. They're also like quarterback, wide receiver stuff is not working for them. Justin Jefferson only caught 33% of the balls thrown his way. The vibes are just way off in Minnesota. This is not good. Baltimore were unimpressive but somewhat professional in this game, so they got the job done. They were the beneficiary of 3 turnovers, and that's the difference here. Like, Baltimore win, that's good. Minnesota are not very good, and Baltimore are not a scary prospect yet. They could be, but all the people squawking online about how this is the start of something huge, they're not there yet. Show it to me against some better opponents. Show me, you winning by more than 1 score when you have a +3 turnover differential. Maybe that'll scare me a little bit more. Pittsburgh at Chargers, 10-25. Pittsburgh just looked entirely lost in this game. They were 0 for 9 on third downs until their touchdown in the fourth quarter. Their first quarter drives netted a total of 5 yards and gave up a safety. 3 of their 12 drives reached the heady heights of 20 yards or more. Like, this offense was turgid. The Chargers were no great shakes, but similar to the last game, they were just competent enough. Herbert went 220 yards and a touchdown, but he took 5 sacks in this game. The run game was consistent, but consistently just below par, like 3.6, 3.7 yards on average. McConkey had a good game. He went over 100 yards and got a touchdown. But again, they had 8 drives that didn't even make it to the 20-yard mark. Like, this is not good. They missed a field goal. It's grim. They got the job done. Pittsburgh were just not at the races. Chargers defense, can they keep them in games? Maybe. I just also wonder if we're starting to see what half a season in a 40-something-year-old Aaron Rodgers' body is maybe not doing all the things he wants him to do. Rams at San Francisco up next, 42-26. This is Matt Stafford. Just when you were mentioning Drake Maye in the MVP thing, I was just like, I would have thought maybe Matt Stafford would be the leader on that one. Third straight 4-touchdown, no interception game in the row. I believe he's now 20 touchdowns and no interceptions over his last 6 games. San Francisco had no response in this game at all. They trailed by 2 scores for nearly the entire game. Mac Jones, however, does look very good and does seem to know how to run this offense. 33 of 39. That's a crazy completion. 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. The problem here for them was Christian McCaffrey was just entirely stuffed in this game. He had 12 carries for 30 yards, so the ground game did nothing. He had 66 yards receiving, so still just came up short of the buck that he wants, but like, yeah, it just wasn't there. And their defensive injuries are really starting to show. San Francisco are becoming more of a sieve. Rams look like absolute NFC monsters at the moment. I would not want to be going out and facing them. For San Francisco, there's talk that we might see Brock Purdy coming back this week. There's also a lot of talk that maybe there might be some quarterback controversy coming in, given how well Mac Jones is running this offense. Giants at Chicago, 20-24. Well, you got a coach fired. It's not going to go too well for you. Another 10-point lead lost in the fourth quarter by the Giants. Absolute coward move by Daboll that I think should be the first thing that people watch whenever they are considering him for another job, where they were at the 1 yard line on fourth and goal on the 1 yard line. He decided to kick a field goal, which is just ridiculous. Then, when he kicked the field goal, the opposing team caused a penalty, which would then move it to the half yard line. And he said, nah, keep the points on the board. And that was, like, I would have fired him before the rest of that fucking quarter finished if I could have. That was just ridiculous. Dart got concussed in this game, so Russell Wilson came in. Tracy actually worked really good on the ground. The defense did its job until the fourth quarter, but bizarrely had no sacks in this game. Again, I would wonder, they have taught them that the fourth quarter exists, right? Because this is the second game where their defense has just completely disappeared in the fourth quarter. Bears look incredibly mid in this game despite all the hype they're getting online. The run game looked good. A lot of out of form work from Williams, so I can imagine his head coach is tearing his hair out. Williams is doing a lot of freestyling and running around and not throwing the ball to the open guy after the 3-step drop, which I think is going to be pissing them off a bit, but it's somewhat working for them, albeit again it's not awe-inspiring, but it got the job done here. Also, unfortunately, due to an injury to him, I have learned my new favourite name of an NFL player. There's a linebacker for the Bears called Ruben Hippolyte II, which is he sounds like some kind of Austro-Hungarian emperor. So I like him a lot. Philadelphia Green Bay 10-7. Oh god, this was a tough watch. There was no first half scores in this game at all. Phillips, after the trade, was good from the get-go. He got a fumble recovery and a massive 4th and 1 stop late in the game. There's a blocked field goal that stops the tie at the end. Like, this was two defenses that were playing really well. Barkley was kept below 3 yards a carry. Jacobs was held to 3.5 yards a carry. The line kept Hurts clean in this one, but there was a sloppy game. Everyone was fumbling it left, right and centre. Philly just about got it out, but Green Bay are looking quite vulnerable. They just couldn't get anything going at all on offense on it. I would wonder where Parsons was in all this game. He's your big, wrecking machine. He's the guy who you spent so much money and draft capital to pick up, and I believe he had 1 tackle in this game, and that was it. He didn't have a sack, he didn't have a tackle for a loss, he didn't have a pass defended. I don't think he had a QB hit. Like, Parsons needs to step it up, and I know they're going to say, oh, he's double teamed and whatnot. If you're paying that much money to a guy like that, you need to make sure he's performing, and he is not. Vegas at Denver, 7-10. Oh my god. 2 absolutely terrible games to bookmark this week. Putrid stuff. The Broncos win. They had more penalties than first downs. They had 11 penalties and 10 first downs. A blocked punt in the third quarter really was the difference here. Allowed a short field to get things done. There were 4 drives they had in negative yardage. 6 drives that were sub 10 yards. This was awful. Their offense was doing nothing. They won this game at home and the crowd were booing them. Like, that is how bad this game was. Raiders were absolutely no better in this one. The total yardage in this game, 188 to 220. Both of them passed for 150 each. It was grim. Very, very, very grim. Cleveland let the Jets up next, 20-27. A gutsy Jets win with 2 special teams touchdowns, one on a punt and one on a kickoff return. I don't even really know how they did. Fields completed 6 passes in this game, Sean. 6 passes for 54 yards, and I
think basically all the yards came from one play.
Yeah, it was one.
I think one play out, he got like 72 yards.
Yeah, I think there was like a 36 or 38 yard play in there. Like, it was just nuts. Like 54 yards on 6 completions and a touchdown. Hall had a big day. I presume in part to either make him happy about being there and show that they will use him, or to just run the legs off him before he inevitably leaves at the end of the year. But he had 125 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. Yeah, like they knew what they were doing, and they stuck to it. They had a 3-to-1 run to pass split, so for every time they passed, they had 3 run plays. There's a couple of teams that could take some fucking notes here, maybe. 6 sacks in this game, 4 of them for McDonald, who had a monster game. Gabriel definitely looked better in this game, 17 of 32, 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. One absolutely beautiful pass, I think mid second quarter, I think it was, down the left hand side. But he took 6 sacks. Like, the line isn't helping him, but he is also just not seeing them when they're coming in. They had no second half score at all. This was a messy game, but heartening for New York. They said they sold off so many pieces, but they still managed to gut out a win, so that's nice for them to see. New Orleans and Carolina, 17-7. This was the Shook coming out party. Yeah, we shook it off. 282 yards and 2 touchdowns. He actually looked pretty decent in this one. Chris Olave went for 104 yards and a touchdown, and their defense was stout versus the run. Absolutely killed Carolina. They had no response as soon as you shut down Rico Dowdle. They beat them, like, they had double the yardage in this one. Carolina scored a touchdown in their opening drive and literally did nothing else. Their next 5 possessions netted 36 yards. They had 4 punts, and they had 83 first half yards total, which I believe is a franchise record for the worst performance in terms of yardage. There's not a huge amount to take away from this, apart from both of these teams play Atlanta next, because one of them is up by, and as we discussed, Atlanta are kind of a coin flip thing where one week they'll be good and one week they'll be bad, so it'll just entirely come down to which one gets the good one and which one gets the bad one. Very little else to take away from that game. Arizona at Seattle, 22-44. Under dominance by Seattle in this one. 35-0 in the second quarter. Darnold threw the ball 12 times. Like, not 12 completions, 12 attempts. 178 yards, a touchdown and interception. They just ran the ball down their throat. 46 carries for just shy of 200 yards, 4 yards a carry. Still very sloppy from them. They had 4 fumbles, 2 of which they lost. But they absolutely ate against Brissett and his Arizona team. They sacked him 5 times, held him to a 50% completion rate. He got his 2 touchdowns, but the problem for Arizona was they were down by so much so early in this game that they were never at the races. Like, they were just flinging the ball all over the shop, hoping for something to happen, and they just kept letting mistakes happen. McBride was basically all they had on the offense. This Arizona team needs to clean house really, really soon, because there's just nothing going there. Finally, Detroit at Washington, 44-22. One-sided, but not bad from Washington. Detroit scored on every drive that they had, except for the last one, where it was the end of the game. Gibbs had 172 all-purpose yards and 3 touchdowns. Jared Goff, 320 yards and 3 touchdowns. 546 total yards in this one, 30 total first downs. Like, this Detroit offense was a fucking machine in this game. It helps that Washington's defense is old and slow and whatnot, but they were just clinical. Mariota looked fine on the other side, frankly. 213 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The run game was a bit spotty, so they could probably do with getting that solidified up. It felt almost like like the coaching staff were a little bit unsure about how they wanted to split carries, because obviously they normally go with Bill a lot. We saw a bit more of Chris Rodriguez mixed in this one, and he had a couple of decent runs in it. Like, I think they're just trying to figure something out. They need wide receiver help. They need Daniels back, but that's not happening this week. McLaren is almost certainly not going to be playing this week. Like, they did okay, but this is kind of, this is a Washington team with their backup quarterback missing their top wide receiver, missing their top running back, and they're putting up 22 points against a decent defense is not too bad, but like, they have absolutely no hope of beating the Lions when the Lions are in the form that they were in this game. Their season is likely gone for Washington, but there's some life in the old dog yet. So, and on that lovely note, we'll move to the games for next week. So first up, Sean, Thursday Night Football, your Patriots taking on the Jets.
Away from their one difficult game of the year, at least until they have to play the Ravens, the Pats are back to their really horribly easy schedule. A home game against the Jets. I mean, given with the state of the Jets, especially offensively. I mean, I can't think this could be much of a contest, and surely the Pats will romp here. They're looking in a very good place offensively. Things are starting to click, and even their defense is starting to make some moves. Whereas the Jets are still hurting in a big way from the trades on the defensive side. They're not doing much, but the offense is just horrendous. Like, I think the rumors are already that Justin Fields, if he's already on the chopping block again. Yeah, no, there's just no way the Jets can win this game. I think the Pats have to be clear favorites.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Next up is the Madrid game. So remember to set your clocks early if you're over in the States. Washington at Miami. We've gone for Miami across the board in this one. I think this should be a decent back and forth in this game. I don't think Miami are as good as they showed against the Bills there last week. Washington, while they lost badly to Detroit, I think played well enough. Mariota's a decent backup. Should see a bit of fun in this one. The thing that might hamper them a bit is Miami are very finesse. Even in the run game, they like to do kind of finesse bits rather than thumper through the middle stuff. And I believe the forecast is currently for it to be quite wet, so that might not work quite so well. It might lean a little bit more towards Washington's run game, but look, neither of these teams are playing for anything massively important at this point, but I think it'll be good fun. I reckon Miami, if they can get the pass game going, should be able to get moving. Washington's defense is just a little bit too old that if as long as the surface isn't too wet and the guys can get speed to the outside, I don't think they have the speed on the defense to be able to close them down. So Miami should win this game, but weather might make Washington have a little bit more of a chance. Next up, Sean, into the early window, Carolina at Atlanta.
Yeah, this is a tricky one to kind of get a sense of because you look on paper and you think, okay, the Falcons are the more talented team. But then you think about recent performances and you're like, well, probably the Panthers, despite the disaster of their loss to the Saints this week. Before that, I mean, the Panthers were a team that put in more recently a good performance. I mean, the Falcons, it's for a team that's hot and cold. It's been 3 weeks now, 3 or 4 weeks since the Falcons have actually showed up in a positive way. We talk about them as a good team. And so every reason to believe, you called for Carolina here, and myself and Ronan have gone for Atlanta. I can kind of see the logic of the Carolina thing, to be honest with you. They have a good defense, which, they if they find a way to stifle the Falcons the way other teams have done the last while, it'll be a kind of a low scoring game where kind of one big play might win it. And then you've got Dowdle, who, albeit he didn't have a great
Hmm.
game against the Saints, but it certainly seems like the coaches have finally figured out he's the guy. Just give him the ball 20 times a game, and he'll win you most games. And the Falcons are just off one of the
Gi-
worst run defensive performances I think in history.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can certainly see how the Panthers could win this, but I just feel I did actually say this last week as well. I just feel that the Falcons are due to win a game. No, they should have been the Colts that they beat, but the surely the good Falcons will turn up eventually. And you just think about if they get Bijan going or they get Drake London going or Penix has a good game, the Falcons should romp here. But I do a little bit of me, so I'll give them my prediction to win, but a little me does feel like this is going to be like a 10-9 kind of game where it's just that Rico Dowdle had the one big play and win it. So I can certainly see the Panthers winning, but I believe in the law of the narrative enough to back the Falcons in this one.
Yeah, like I would say the only thing that I would be considering here would be Atlanta are coming back from Germany not uh, having not taken a bye week. So they're going to be tired as well as having a really shitty run defense. So yeah, I'm kind of I'm pinning my hopes on title. You may note that I have a lot of solo picks. I am not doing well in the picks this year. So I'm swinging for the fences and taking a few outsiders this week. Next up, Tampa Bay at Buffalo. I've gone for Buffalo. You and Ronan have gone for Tampa Bay. Um, I think it was a blip. that's 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 my rationale. And Tampa Bay really did not impress me last week. I don't think they played particularly well against New England. I think the injuries are starting to mount. I think the age of that team is starting to show, particularly on the defensive side. Buffalo, yeah, look, Kincaid being out is going to cause issues. I think they're going to try and focus in on the run game a little bit more. And we'll see, like Dawson Knox or someone like that might be able to be the surprise big player in this one. But I just think Buffalo at home on the slide, they want to beat Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay, obviously, they've just watched New England beat them as a measuring stick inside the division. You don't want to then immediately lose to the team that they've just beaten. You don't want to fall further back in the division from them. But then, even if you end up in a close tied situation, it's going to go to common opponents. So you're going to need to beat the common opponents as well. I think Buffalo are going to be enraged after what happened in Miami. And I think they're going to beat the shit out of Tampa Bay. The thing is, if they play like they did last week, Tampa Bay will 100% win this game. But I'm gonna take a solo pick anywhere I can get something that looks like a plausible edge. Next up, Sean, the Chargers at Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, you picked the Jags to win this one. I mean, I think that's maybe a step too far because the Jags they're just not good. I think is the fundamental line you can run on them. And it's very hard to think the last time the Jags actually played well, right? Even when they beat the Chiefs, whatever that was 3 or 4 weeks ago, they didn't actually play particularly well in doing that. And it's very hard to get behind a team that seems to believe in itself so little, and to allow setback to hamper them as much as possible. And I don't see the Lawrence thing. I think we have enough data of the Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence era now to know that he's not going to make Lawrence any better than he was. Like I think Lawrence maybe just has a ceiling that is a lot lower than people thought it would be, and I don't think he's ever going to find his groove, at least not in this particular system. Now the Chargers they've had quite a messy season. They've looked. I mean, the game against the Steelers was the best they've looked in a while, I would say. Even though they didn't look lights out. They did just look competent, and I do think they maybe have solved a little bit in terms of figuring out that balance between run and pass, and the ways to kind of keep the offensive side ticking over. Lad McConkey, it kind of feels like he's maybe kind of emerging into being a real star on that side of it. So the Chargers, I mean, they're an ugly team, and sometimes they get really grinded down. They tend to play to the level of the team that they're against. So I do wonder if maybe this is just going to be a very ugly game, where neither team is particularly competent, and maybe the Chargers win it on like a late field goal or something. But after having watched the way the Jags just collapsed against the Texans, I just can't back them. I just cannot find a reason to think that this Jags team is capable of winning that many games against good teams when they just seem so capable of falling apart at the first sign of trouble, and there just seems to be so little to love about them. So I'm going to go for the Chargers to win this, even though they're traveling across the country into the early window, and this is notorious for being where they struggle. This was the window in which they lost to the Giants. This is the window in which they only just about beat the Dolphins when the Dolphins were in a very bad place. So I can certainly see the logic on that side, but I just can't back the Jags anymore.
Yeah, well, look, I think the Chargers are hurting a lot at the moment. They are feeling that the tackle stuff, and you could see that in the number of sacks that they were hit with last week. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. I think Jacksonville at home after a bad loss with the coach, even if he's given up on Lawrence, getting into that defensive room and just being like, we need to do X, Y, and Z. I think both of these teams are quite disappointing teams this year on where you would take them to be. And it's a weird thing to say about the Chargers because they are like they have a good chunk of wins lined up, but like they're just not quite there. And I'm just going to take the Jacksonville Jags to get one over on them, mostly because I nearly picked the Titans to win this week in my hunt for in my hunt for ones that I could get one back on. And then I remembered that the Chargers just squeaked past the Titans like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that happened when they were missing tackles, and now those tackles are gone again. So we'll see. Next up, Chicago at Minnesota. Myself and Ronan have gone for Chicago. Sean's gone for Minnesota. This is, I think, it's going to be an interesting game. Minnesota won this matchup earlier on in the season, and it was close. It was. geez, what was it? It was a 3 point game if I remember correctly, and JJ McCarthy was playing in that game as well. JJ has not impressed me so far. From what I've seen, Chicago, they're not doing everything right, but you can see stuff building in it. I don't think they're there yet. I'm basing mine mostly on the fact that I actually think Minnesota are quite bad, and not that I think the Bears are phenomenal. I also think these teams are close enough to each other's levels that I think them splitting the series would make the most sense to me, albeit that they'd be splitting where the away teams are winning. But yeah, I can see the argument if JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson are back on the same page and he starts catching more than 1 in 3 passes, then yeah, Chicago could definitely get burned here. But I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Chicago development wise, and I hope it may continue here. And this Minnesota defense really hasn't been up to much in the last couple of weeks, so we'll see what happens. Green Bay at New York Giants next, Sean. Will they put up more than 7 points?
It's an interesting one, right? Because the Giants are obviously, you know, coachless, and I mean, running back less and star wide receiver less, and who knows what state Jackson Dart's concussion protocol will have him in. So I just don't know how much the Giants are going to be able to field the team. And the Packers, I don't know. I mean, they've gone from being the darlings of the season and looking like the best team to just falling into a pit in the last few weeks and just not being able to perform whatsoever. I mean, the last two performances from the Packers have been just god awful, especially on the offensive side. So you would be worried about that. But I do think that I think that the Giants are going to be in such a transitional place, and they're not quite sure what they're going to be able to field in terms of personnel. I just think that the Packers have enough on both sides really, but mostly on the defensive side to take the win here and kind of right the ship a little bit. But if it's another bad performance by the Packers, then I think we were entering full crisis mode because it really feels like the momentum of the early season is just completely evaporated for them, and they're maybe don't have all the answers as we thought they did earlier in the year.
Yeah, we're not buying into the Mike Kafka bump happening here. We actually, I suppose we don't even know who's going to be starting a quarterback for the Giants yet, do we? So yeah, it's a lot of change going on there. Next up is my pick of the week. There was a couple of options for pick of the week, but I decided I want to go with this one, Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. I've gone for Cincinnati. You guys have gone for Pittsburgh in this game. Yeah, like the reason I'm picking this for my pick of the week is because the AFC North is wide open, and this essentially is the game that will decide, or at least in my head, it's the game that'll decide whether or not it's worth Joe Burrow returning this year. Because if they win, then they're only a game back from Pittsburgh, at most a game back from Baltimore, depending on what happens with Baltimore. So like, yeah, although Baltimore are playing Cleveland, so I think we know what's going to happen there. But it's an interesting one. Cincinnati's offense has been working really, really well under Joe Flacco, or sorry, under Joe Flacco, and it's quite exciting to watch. Their defense has been underperforming, but is still getting stops here and there. This Pittsburgh team, its offense is sputtering. Its defense is old, but is kind of working a little bit more. We know how much the coaching staff in Pittsburgh are unhappy that Joe Flacco will be playing in this game. I love the matchup of two 40-something-year-old quarterbacks trying to grizzly old man it against each other out in the elements, the Three Rivers with the crowds and the Yinzers and the terrible towels furling. I think it's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be gritty and hard hitting, and it feels almost cinematic in my head as I think about it. And then the idea that it's a a grizzly 40-something-year-old Joe Flacco playing his heart out to ensure that someone young gun is going to come in and replace him this season is even kind of more fun. So I just think storyline wise, matchup wise, I just think it's a fun game. So that's why it's my pick of the week anyway. Sean, next up, Houston at Tennessee. Oh God.
Yeah, from a fun game to just a real grim fest. Um, Houston, good defense, but offensively, no matter who's a quarterback, there's just an awful not an awful lot to love. Nico Collins getting back to his groove, and if they get CJ Stroud back, then maybe there's something to be cooking there on the Houston offensive side, but at the moment they're very much reliant on their defense to kind of pull them through games, or as in last week, for Davis Mills to just turn up for a quarter and just go nuts. With the Titans, I mean, you know, they're green shoots. They played, okay, they weren't particularly competitive in most games that they've played this year. They gave the Chargers a decent enough game last time, just before they went on their bye. So there's maybe something that's being formed there. There's just not an awful lot of talent, and Cam Ward really could do with an O line because I don't think he's going to develop much if he's getting smacked around 6 or 7 times a game. So I just it's very hard, and I know you almost packed the Titans this one. I find it very hard to imagine
Yeah.
the Titans winning a game, even.
Ideologically, I don't want to put their name in my mouth.
I think, yeah, I think it's just they're just a very poor team, and at least if we compare these two teams, at least the Texans have a defense, and they do occasionally have an offense. And I don't think you can really say that about the Titans in any way. I don't think defensively they're that strong, and I don't
No.
think offensively there's a tremendous amount to love about them. So I think you got to back Houston to win this one. But I have no doubt that there's every chance they could be dragged into a dirt bowl here that the Titans win. But
Yeah.
until that happens, I think Texans to win. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Into the late window, San Francisco at Arizona. We've gone for San Francisco across the board. Yeah, look, San Francisco are hurting on defense, and that will give Arizona some chances. They're keeping Jacoby Brissett in there, so we'll expect to see the offense work a little bit better. But their run game is subpar. They're off a bit on throws and so on. On the San Francisco side, they're going to want to, once again get back to what works, and it was what was stopped last week, which is channeling everything through CMC. And I don't think Arizona have the personnel on defense to be able to deal with that particularly effectively, given that you've got a high percentage completion passer under center at quarterback, regardless of which one is coming. But essentially that, you I just don't think Arizona's defense has enough to deal with this. And I think even though they will be able to move the ball on San Francisco, because San Francisco's defense is so injured, I think San Francisco can outscore them, and I think they can run, clock control with the run game. We've seen them starting to actually work in. Is it Robinson that they traded for? So like, I can see San Francisco controlling this game, running a lot of the pass game through Kittle and just feeding CMC and watching Arizona beat themselves. So yeah, San Francisco across the board. Next up is your pick of the week, Sean. You've decided you want to have it's all NFC West here, isn't it? An NFC West battle for supremacy. Seattle at the LA Rams. Myself and Ronan have gone
Yeah,
for the Rams, and you have gone for Seattle.
Yeah, a kind of a last minute change. I had a different game pick for my pick of the week, but then I thought, no, I think this actually is the most important game of the week. And unlike the other one, I was going to pick Kansas City Denver. This Seattle Rams game, might actually be fun to watch. I mean, there is an argument to be made here that these are the two best teams in the NFC. I mean, you look at the other contenders in that conference: Detroit, Philadelphia, Green Bay, or whatever. None of those teams seem to be quite at the level that the Rams and the Seahawks are at the current moment. The Rams obviously are offensive juggernaut. Matt Stafford is really rolling back the years. Puka Nakua is having a wonderful year. They've got that perfect blend of run and pass, and they've got a defense that is just really stepped up in a big way from where they were. This is a defense that pretty much had a game plan for how to handle CMC and take him out of the game, and kind of force the Niners to beat them through the air, which ultimately they couldn't do. I think Sean McVay, and I've said this a few times, I think he's a really good coach. He puts out really competitive teams every year, and this is one of the better versions of the Rams. I think they've got the they've got the look of a team that could make a championship run if they stay healthy, and Stafford stays in the form that they are. But that said, they may not even win their division because the Seahawks are surprisingly magnificent at the moment. Like, there is something very scary and ominous about how the Seahawks are playing. Like, the just utter destruction. Okay, they only beat the Cardinals, but it's very hard to beat any NFL team to be 35-0 up
Oh
against
yeah.
any NFL team in the second quarter. Like, they just seem to have this really beautiful blend of you've got Mike McDonald and his coaching team seem to have a plan on both the offensive and the defensive side. They seem to be well calibrated for the teams that they're playing. They come into every game with this is how we're going to win this game, and whether that be whether they let Darnold go off on one and let him have a passing clinic, and I think Darnold is he's on a wonderful place, and it's amazing to see a guy who we thought the Vikings were the saving of him, and I thought him leaving Minnesota would be a disastrous move on his part, but he seems to have gotten even better. But the thing about the Seahawks that you can really like at the moment is they don't actually need Darnold all the time. Like you can have a game where Darnold only throws 12 times and the run game takes over, and they've got a plan for how to win on the ground as well. And if that's not enough, they've got a very scary defense that goes after teams. And obviously Mike McDonald, when he was a Ravens guy, the defenses, the innovative defenses was his thing, and you started to see the beginning of that. So I just think what we got here is a really exciting matchup between two incredibly talented teams with just elite coaches battling for a divisional title that in the end might end up being, well, certainly it gets you a home field playoff game, but might be a number one seed kind of thing. Whoever wins this division, provided they don't take enough games off one another, and obviously the 49ers will have something to say about that as well. Whoever wins the division could end up being the number one seed and being the favorite to go through on the NFC side. So I think this is just a really important game to the trajectory of the NFC in terms of who gets out of the West as the divisional winner, who might be the number one seed, and just how good these two teams are when they play each other. I think we get a real sense of are these two teams as genuinely elite as they both appear to have been in the past few weeks. So two teams in a really good place with a lot of talent at the absolute peak of their form. I just want to watch it. I just want to see what happens, and I think it's going to be a fascinating tie. So I've gone for Seattle because I think they have just the tiniest bit more momentum at the moment than the Rams do. But I have no doubt this game will be a high quality, and whoever wins will be a worthy victor.
Yeah, I got to say, overall, this is a tasty late slate. Not all of it, though. Baltimore, Cleveland. We've gone for Baltimore across the board here. Now, this is the thing. Baltimore are not actually all that good at the moment. And this will be interesting to see if this, revived offense that they've got that, put up 27 points against Minnesota, how they look against a Cleveland defense that is very, very, very good, like top three in the league good. Their offense in Cleveland is not phenomenal, but it has been a little bit better. Gabriel has been looking a little bit better for them. As I talked last week, he threw two touchdowns. He was over 50% completion. They've got the young running backs there, and the big concern for Baltimore was even before they had the injury to Jackson and so on, was that their defense looked utter shite for the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season. And then they've turned it around and they've looked a little bit better of late. But are they actually back to form? They should be able to, if that is the case, absolutely destroy this team. This is a rookie quarterback who is bad at having visibility of where sacks are coming from, who is in his fourth game. Like, they should definitely be able to absolutely feast here if their defense is back to being good. But I don't count JJ McCarthy, or I don't count that Dolphins team 2 weeks ago, or even to a certain extent the Bears 3 weeks ago, as being like, oh well, this will be a real test for them. So I think just show it to us and show us that your offense is back to where it was, because their offense hadn't been fantastic either, and this is a good defense. Baltimore should win this game by 14 to 16 points. Just go and do that, and then we'll start talking about you a little bit more, because I see it. I've been calling it for the last month that Baltimore are going to get back on track and are going to move on up, and it's going to come down to those December and January games against the Steelers for the division and so on. And this will neither stop nor, well, losing this game won't stop that, I'll say. But I want to see how they deal with a very tough defense, and this is a good setup for that. So that's the only thing that's worth watching in here, because otherwise this is a in division game this time of year. generally tend to get soggy, tough, slobber knocker defensive fests, so won't be the prettiest thing to watch. But let's see how Baltimore's offense fares against a better defense. Yeah. Next up, Sean, big one for the AFC West, Kansas City at Denver. Myself and Ronan have gone for Kansas City. You've gone for Denver.
Yeah, a number of interesting factors to kind of consider in this one. I mean, the big one might be that Kansas City are coming off a bye, and obviously, notoriously, Andy Reid is the master of coming off the bye. When he gets 2 weeks to think about a team and how they're going to tackle it. His teams do quite well. They're 22-4 coming off the bye, which I believe is the best record in the NFL for kind of head coaches of any kind of longevity. So, I mean, you would think KC, and they're playing a Denver team which have looked. I mean, ugly is the only word you can use to describe the Broncos have played, particularly say in the last 3 or 4 weeks, where they're winning games in the fourth quarter, but they're getting into awful messes before the fourth quarter in order to do that, and it's very much just they turn up for one quarter, and that seems to be enough. So I mean, on paper, you might go, well, surely this might be a Kansas City win and put the Broncos back in their box and kind of establish the Chiefs, give the Chiefs a chance to establish themselves again as the best team in the AFC West and give them a kind of a clear run at overcoming the Chargers and getting back to the top of their division. But I have a feeling the Broncos are going to make this a very ugly game. I think Sean Payton. He's a guy who comes into games, especially on the defensive side, with a clear game script. And I don't. I mean, the Chiefs had a 3 or 4 week run there in the middle of the season where they were looking quite good, but otherwise it's been a little bit sloppy. Teams seem to have maybe figured the Chiefs out on the offensive side a little bit. Certainly, coaches who have faced them quite a bit and know how to play them. You think about the Chargers or the Bills or whatever. They certainly have given them a kind of a hard game here. So I just have a sense that it's going to be a game where the Broncos defense kind of stifles the Chiefs offense a little bit, and then it will come down to the fourth quarter situation. It will come down to Bo Nix kind of stepping up in the fourth quarter. Can he be that guy? And even though I don't think it's going to be the prettiest game, I kind of just believe you've got Denver at home. Obviously, Mile High is kind of a nightmare place to play because of how high up it is. And I think Denver just have that momentum where they just believe they're going to win every game they get into, no matter how much things go against them. I think all those things combined to me, but I'm just going to give the edge to the Broncos here and pick them to win. But I think it's a very important game, obviously, for the AFC West, and was originally my pick of the week. I pivoted to the other game because it's prettier, because I do think this game could end up being quite a slogfest. And the question we have to ask is, can the Chiefs win a game ugly? Can they win a kind of a 13-10 type game? And I don't think we've maybe seen that side of the Chiefs yet this year, but I would be interested to see if it can emerge here.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think this is going to be a tough game. I think when you look at this on the schedule and you look at what happened last week, you go, oh yeah, trap game. Like they just didn't give a shit about the Raiders coming in. They weren't even thinking about that game, and that's why it got so close. Denver are better than their performance was last week for almost every other game of the season. I think all games this season they performed better than they did then. I think you're right. Peyton's got a big red circle around this game. They always do, and yeah, I think they're gonna give it to the Chiefs pretty good. They've got a top tier defense. They know that the Chiefs are down their main running back, so it's going to be Kareem Hunt and Brashad Smith and some combination of that. So they know the run game's not going to be a big factor, so they can pin their ears back and they've got a good secondary. Like I think Denver are well equipped to take on the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs pass game coming off the bye, Andy Reid knowing what he's looking for gives him an advantage to help even out that and the whole home field advantage of Denver. And Denver will also have the added pressure of their fans, because their last game was at home as well, were pretty pissed off with a game against the Raiders being that close. They're going to want to come out firing. So I think we're going to get their all in it. I'm citing Kansas City because coming off the bye, I think it'll work, and I think these teams know each other very well. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I can see Denver taking this game, particularly if Bo Nix gets into rhythm in this game and the Chiefs pass rush has not been up to a huge amount. I want to see Chris Jones do something because I'm getting really annoyed at how ineffective he's being this year. PFF have him graded very high, but if you watch the tape, it's just like he's not actually getting there. He's not causing the impact. He's not, he's not earning the money he's getting paid essentially, because he's 31. He's lost a step. So hopefully they can scheme something up to throw Bo Nix off his step. But yeah, I think this is going to be an exciting one. So good shout. Sunday Night Football. Detroit at Philadelphia, another contender for game of the week as well. Just intriguing to see. Detroit across the board for ourselves. I got to say, Detroit in its current form is terrifying. I was not blown away by the Philadelphia performance last week. I think Detroit have the personnel to be able to exploit it. I think the form they're in at the moment is great. The downside is this is in Philly. Philadelphia are also incredibly volatile week to week as to what team you're going to get. So you could get a really, really good performance. I think both these teams have their eyes set on, Super Bowl, and rightly so. Both teams are well positioned to be competing for that. And I just, I'm in the current run of form they're in. I'm siding Detroit because I am wondering if Philly are slipping a little bit. Like we talked about it in previous weeks that there's discontent, there's disquiet, certain bits aren't working for them, and so on. This will be a kind of ironmonger game. Ironmonger is the wrong term. Smith game, I think, is what I'm kind of looking for. This is basically going to get red, red, red hot, and we're going to see what they can be forged into afterwards. Because I think this will have a big impact on obviously the standings and the playoff stuff for both teams, but also we're at the inflection point of the season now where what Philly are we getting down the stretch? Is it going to be the Philly of last year or is it going to be the Philly of 2 years ago? For Detroit, is this just a bump in the road where they've started to look incredibly good and they'll come back down to earth playing a very good defense? Or can they sustain this against this type of defense? Can they lay down a marker and say, Philly, if you want to beat us in the playoffs, you're going to have to be able to put up 40 points because we're going to be able to put up 40 points. So I like this and I like the kind of the showmanship and the for lack of a better term, dick measuring that's going to go on in this contest between these two head coaches who are both adamant that they are better than the other one and their team is the best team. So I'm very excited for that one. Although there's no way in fucking hell I'm going to be watching it live because I'll have been watching football since like 11 a.m. that day. So I don't think I'll make it quite that long. Monday Night Football, Sean, Dallas at the Vegas Raiders. We've got Dallas across the board.
Yeah, another week in which there's lots of potential contenders for primetime games, and the NFL goes to watch the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, I mean the Cowboys are. I don't know. I mean the Cowboys are a team that the standard narrative is their defense. Their defense is horrendous, but at least their offense is good. But that's not even necessarily been true the last few weeks. So I'm just not entirely sure how much we should love the Cowboys. I mean, okay, they're coming off a bye now, so maybe they've had a chance to kind of right the ship a little bit. I mean, the bad performance against the Cardinals, will be something they'll have simmered with for 2 weeks. And the Vegas Raiders are not the biggest challenge in the world. I
No.
mean, the Raiders seemed very good this year at losing games by small margins, but not necessarily winning all that many games. It kind of feels like the Pete Carroll thing. They're getting somewhere, but they're not getting there particularly fast. And it's not entirely clear the place they'll get to will be all that exciting anyway. So I think the fact that Dallas, with the 2 weeks to prep, and I think they'll be hurting and they'll want to show off a little bit. I think Dak Prescott, on his form, is quite a formidable quarterback, and I think they do have an awful lot to like on the offensive side. And I just don't see that same thing on the Raiders side. I just don't see what it is to get you can get possibly get excited a bit about with what the Raiders have. I think you give the edge to the Cowboys here, but I don't expect it to be a particularly spectacularly fun game or an interesting one. I think it's just going to be two mediocre teams kind of battling it out. But yeah, I think you got to give Dallas the edge here because I just don't think the Raiders have shown us that they can win games all that well.
No, also just looking ahead in the Cowboys schedule, if the race for a perfect 500 season is on, this is a must win, I think. Uh, because they're probably not beating the Eagles, they're probably not beating the Chiefs, they're probably not beating the Lions. Then they got Vikings, Chargers, Commanders, Giants, and I think they need to win three of those four. So yeah, I think because you're not winning four of those four, so you gotta win this week if you want to get to 500. Very good. Well, that'll wrap us up. Any plans for the next couple of days then, Sean?
No, I think it's going to be well. We have to wait for this building to be done. I think the end of the week is when they say they'll be finished, and then we'll see what my house looks like. Be nice to be able to use all the rooms in my house again.
Mm.
And then yeah, I don't know. We've got some kind of prep stuff to be done for kind of family changes coming in the
Mm.
next month or two. So there's a couple of things to be done in
Sean's
that
getting
score.
divorced. No, no, no. Uh, just family changes is a
So
weird term.
the people who know will know what I mean.
Mm.
Yes. So yes, a couple of things to be done with that, and then we got in-laws coming week after next. So yeah, maybe a quiet weekend wouldn't be the worst thing in the world
No, no. Whereas I, on the
to
other
look
hand, will
forward
be
to.
off to Madrid to drink rioja and eat chickpea stew and watch the Dolphins play the Washington Commanders. Very exciting. Very exciting. Uh, Looking forward to that now. And then, yeah, then I'll be back and I'll give a probably still bleary-eyed rendition of how the game went to the podcast next week. It'll be exciting times. There's a lot of Irish bars in Madrid. It turns out. Because every single
Oh,
one of
nice.
the NFL events that they have arranged is taking place in a different Irish bar. There's so many of them. It's bizarre. I wonder if it's just because so I think they do a lot of the kind of the small taverna kind of bite like nibbles and glasses of wine kind of stuff,
Mm.
rather than like more pub culture style ones. So maybe that's what the market that's being filled by the Irish bars is, or something like that. But yeah, and I suppose you'd need a bigger space to be able to fit in all the American fans. That's to do with numbers, not to do with size. Americans, don't get too angry. Don't message me too much about that. But also probably that. So that'll wrap us up for this week. So it's bye from myself, bye from Sean.
Bye.
This has been all four quarters. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat to you next week.